Well, good morning, everybody. One of the big things we've been talking about all week, in addition to the rains from Beryl, has been the wildfire smoke. And I was just thinking about that as watching the satellite last evening as the sun was setting. Now, before we come to that wildfire smoke, take note of the secondary low that was on the back side of Beryl. So Beryl is here. This is an upper level low that was spinning through parts of the western Corn Belt into the central Corn Belt. And there was some pretty intense convection and some locally very heavy rainfall around this low. You can see what was left of Beryl moving farther into the northeast, and we saw some pretty nasty storms that rolled through this area as well, including 5 tornado reports in New York alone. And that's been the case this entire time that Beryl has rolled from Texas all the way here now into the northeast. It has had along its eastern side and its kind of upper right quadrant just the perfect conditions to make tornadic storms. And so we have smaller circulations, tornadoes, inside of broader circulations like tropical cyclones, and that's a very common thing. The other thing I was taking note of here was just the convection in the mountains. If you've never been to our Rocky Mountains here in the United States, especially in summer, and watch these storms explode, they're some of the in my opinion, just some of the most photogenic and just amazing storms. And sometimes they never make it off the mountains. And so you can watch them from the foothills, like in a city like Boulder, as an example, and just view the storms. It's something quite breathtaking if you're into it. But I mentioned smoke at the beginning, and that's where I want to start, because there's a lot of wildfire smoke from fires in the west. Some very large ones in parts of California, Washington, but some huge fires that are in parts of northern Alberta, and I want to show you those. So this is just as the sun was rising this morning, but I can take you back here a couple of days on this animation. Let's go all the way back here. And so this was the kind of start of it a couple of days ago, just watching that wildfire smoke roll through this area. And as we let the sun set and the satellite here on College U page just flips over to infrared, these are the heat signatures from those fires. So northern parts of British Columbia and Alberta here. As we got in, we've got a new image there. So let's go back. There they are. As we got into the day yesterday, take a look at this. You can still see quite a bit of wildfire smoke. But in the middle of the afternoon, large storms began to erupt on that. So you're mixing in this wildfire smoke with the storm activity. And some of these storms put down some locally very heavy rainfall. And I found it interesting to note that once the sun set, several of these fires kind of disappeared on infrared, suggesting that maybe some of the rain from these fires, in addition to the firefighting efforts, put them out. I always just like to try to observe that on satellite here. Another thing I want to point out is I want to take you to the other side of the world. Here's Mongolia and Russia. And if you kind of look at some of the newest satellite data from from MODIS, which is on a platform called Terra, a lot of wildfire smoke coming out of Russia, making its way all the way down to like the Manchurian Plain, which is here. We grow a lot of corn and soybeans and other crops in this area, just north of the Korean Peninsula. And again, so it's just looking at these northern hemisphere fires. So just thinking about satellite data on the whole, I want to take you back to a site I've shown you many times, and I want to give a quick shout out to a friend and a colleague. I've only met him on Twitter, but he seems to be a solid forecaster. His name is Jason Calley, and his Twitter handle is Forecast Guy. So if you want to follow him, he's great. He told me, like, hey, you're underutilizing this page, and I go to it all the time. I've showed it to you a million times, but I kind of stopped at something and didn't exploit the full value of this. Let me show you what he was sharing with me. So the NDVI data comes from MODIS, okay? And remember, NDVI, Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, it is a measure of plant health. We're looking at the difference, that's what the D in this is, the difference between infrared light, near-infrared light, and red light. As we look at the reflectance differences of those two wavelengths, you can get a sense of the health of the crop. Now, I have shown you, like, take it down to admin level 1 so you can see states or provinces or smaller regions. And we've usually stopped there, and I go pick out a spot and we have a look at it. But below this, and I don't know why I didn't do it, but look at all these crop masks we have. And you can pick your different region. I'm going to pick a simple one today. I'm just going to click on this top one here. And, not that one, excuse me. Global, that's the one I want, global. And I'm just going to pick the Esri Sentinel-2 crop. So Sentinel-2 is a satellite. I'm going to click that one. And now what it's going to do is it's going to mask the entire image and only return NDVI values for areas where it's identified as crops. So we're getting rid of forest, and we're getting rid of all the other biomes that aren't cropland. So I'm going to just do a couple things here. Let's start in the United States. I upset one user yesterday because I only looked at 4 states. I thought it was pretty clear that I was only going to look at those 4 states because I wanted to assess those really, really wet areas. If you want to, come in here and choose all of them. This website is free. You can go to it and do it yourself. But a couple of interesting things to point out. I'm going to go to Nebraska. We've talked a lot about the hail in Nebraska. And what is interesting, first of all, let's click on the state, and you can see NDVI in Nebraska through this point in July. So just the newest data just came in. It is above the historical average. And we've had, at times, this spring and now summer, good rains in Nebraska. But those rains have brought in quite a bit of severe weather. So what I'm trying to do, and I just didn't have a lot of time to do this morning, is I've now clicked off of this. I'm going to go back to the map. So click up here on map. And then what you can do is you can change the year. So if you want to see like last year, well, let's just go to last year. If you want to see the year before that, and this is really an amazing tool just to show you, what you're looking at here. There's a legend, so just click on legend, and you'll see the values of the NDVI, and it'll also tell you where you're missing some data or where there's water and things like that. Really quite amazing tool. So let's go back up to 2024, and I've been watching to see where we can identify some of that crop damage from the hail scar that's been left across this part of Nebraska. We'll continue to examine this. Now, as I zoom back out this morning, you come over here and you're like, wait a minute, what the heck is going on in Indiana? First of all, if you click on Indiana, the NDVI values are very high, much above where they were on average and matching where they were last year. But it's important to note that there are places where there aren't data. And one of the reasons, there are multiple, but one of the reasons why you may have no data is because during the 8-day rolling window that this was made, there may have been cloud cover that prevented, a good estimation of what that looks like. So if we just come back to map and say, well, show me last year, you'll notice that we had a better view of it a year ago, and that's why it's showing up much better. So I would encourage you to play around with this and use the crop mask. I think this first one's good. Maybe Jay can let me know if that's one that he likes as well. But I will step back out here, and I want to take you back over to Europe because this has been an area we've been focusing on quite a bit. Now, again, masked for crops and understanding that their crop cycles are a bit different, but summer crops are grown here. We can pick these major crop producing areas. Let's just take a good sample of them. And now knowing that we're not putting forest into this number, we're just looking here again at the crop values. It just illustrates that large region has the NDVI values that are in the lowest part of the distribution. And I want to encourage folks to play around with this and use it. It's a great resource, and I also want to thank Forecast Guy, Jason Callie, for pointing out a valuable side to this. All right. Okay, from there, let's get back to the U.S. here, and I want to show you the last 3 days of total accumulated precipitation as we watch what's left of Beryl finally leave. What a tremendous amount of rainfall that it produced across some key growing areas here in the United States. And for many, this was a huge boom and relieved some drought issues. And some of the other big drought areas, which I'll be looking forward to the new drought monitor, which should be released in about an hour. We're going to see if we're going to make a break for some of those folks as well. But I did want to point you to one other resource. So now you've got better use of NASA's NDVI tool, but I'm sure a lot of you are even a part of this that watch my stuff. I almost never show these maps, but CocoRa's. I'm not a member of CocoRa's because if you could see where I literally live. My yard it's about, 3/4 of an acre, and I've got 30 plus trees on it. So I'm not a CocoRa's observer because my data would be not representative of rainfall because of my trees. I had a grower one time that complained about how terrible the measurements were from satellite, from radar, from everything that he used because it never matched his local rain gauge. He lived in Kansas City. And the problem was that he put his local rain gauge on the side of his barn, and it was collecting rain off the side of the barn. So you got to be careful with how we make these measurements. But CocoRa's here, there's training involved. They actually give you equipment. And this was yesterday, the 10th, just looking at those rainfall totals that came just yesterday right through parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, northwestern Indiana, getting into southern Michigan. And one of the things is if you kind of zoom in here, you can even take a look at the individual stations if you want. But there was a lot of places picking up 3 to 4 inches of rain through this corridor. And I'll just let you know, I'm one of those spots. We had 3.5 inches of rain in my backyard, and it rained again last night. and I have no standing water, which kind of illustrates how desperately this area how desperate this area was for that rainfall that came through. So CocoRa's, it's just maps.cocoras.org. So go out and mess around with it and become a member. It's a fantastic thing to do. All right, the other thing I've been thinking about a lot are these seasonal forecasts and how well they're verifying. I'm just going to look at one today. This is the CPC update, and I'm not going to evaluate the precipitation yet. We're only halfway through this time period, right? So June is done. We're halfway through July. We still have all of August before we would really look back to see if this verifies. And I think the precip is not going to verify right now, but we have to assess later what this might look like. So let's talk about temperatures, because it was pretty clear that NOAA and other modeling agencies were seeing a lot of heat into the west, cooler chances in through here, and heat in the northeast. And I look back so far since the beginning of June, and you have to admit, we've been there, right? This pattern has verified. We've had heat in the southwest, exceptional heat. Recently, it's made it all the way up to the northwest, but this area's had more shots of cooler weather than not. And the south has stayed hot, the northeast has stayed hot, and I think this has been, overall, a pretty impressive forecast for them to pick up on that pattern. Now, what's been driving it has been the flow. It's kind of wanted to stay in the Canadian prairie. It's been more north. I've made that argument many, many times. We've been able to drop fronts into this region that seem to kind of lift as they move into the northeast at times, not always, but at times. And just to show you why this pattern might continue, take a look at the upper level heights right now. Just using the artificial intelligence here, we know that going into this weekend, full retreat of the jet, right? All of the troughs are way up here. Big Bermuda high, large ridge that's going to live over parts of the Four Corners states. And that's when the heat's going to spread across the country. You'll see those temperatures in just a moment. But as we noted, into mid next week, what do we end up getting? The ridge amplifies into the western Canadian prairie out of the western U.S., and a trough comes through that drops temperatures behind it and increases the chances for rain. That would be on Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. And that pushes into the northeast. And where does the ridge rebuild? Back into this area. So some cooler weather comes in here while the heat stays west, and the jet stream pattern, not split in the west, just remains kind of this unbroken flow that's eventually, leaving the Bering Sea and the Gulf of Alaska and just coming across the rest of the country and southern Canada. The farther out I play in the forecast models, the more it's kind of just stagnating into this wave where there's lower heights here over Alaska, but a ridge pushing into it from the south that's increasing the velocity. It kind of comes into the west, rolls through Canada, northwest flow here and out. So there's ridging here and here to the south, and another ridge in this area. So we look out there to the end of the month, and our triple ridge pattern is kind of west shifted. And what I mean by that is, if you took this ridge and moved it out, this ridge would come over to the Midwest, and this one would come closer to the West Coast, and we'd be talking about substantial central U.S. crop damage. But as it stands, they're not doing that. And I'm going to show you the resulting temperature and precipitation patterns. So I almost always do temperature second. That's just out of habit. Let's do it first today. Here is today's maximum temperatures. Again, some of the cooler air underneath that trough, plus what's left over of Beryl, but the heat coming out of the west. This is why we have all the heat, excessive heat watches, warnings, air quality issues, 103 in parts of eastern Montana. This is today on Thursday. Going into Friday, the plains begin to really scorch, hot in the southeast. Cloud cover, I'll show you this in a few minutes, from a tropical disturbance that's sitting right here off the coast, or at least a weak tropical area of low pressure. Saturday and Sunday, the weekend for most of the country is going to be hot. So you're just looking here at Saturday's highs, getting into Sunday. We'll talk more about Texas and why we're getting a little bit of a cooler signal there. But that's it. Sunday, 100-degree weather spreading across a big section of the country and well into the 90s for the Midwest, 90s into the Northeast, deep into the 90s in the Southeast. Monday, same thing. But watch. When does the front come through? The 16th and 17th. So there is your next, right here, shot at some cooler air coming into the upper Midwest. I mean, cooler, but amazing, right? Upper 70s, my goodness. And this is Wednesday. And by the way, California starts to get a little bit of a break early next week from the heat as well, going back down to the low 100s in the Central Valley, and the coastal regions dropping off as well. But we've kind of seen this pattern on repeat and just have to ask, is persistence our best guide? Do we see more of this going forward? So that's out a week. Let's take a look at the GFS ensemble. This is the day 5 through 10, so reflecting that front while the ridge builds behind it. Okay, and then we see it out here again, day 10 through 15. Where is the ridge going to live? So I've got a lot of heat coming back and revisiting the west, warmer conditions building into the Canadian prairie. I don't think you're going to hear a lot of complaints about that. We're going to stay warm in the southeast, but given the flow pattern we're about to discuss in a few moments, I see a lot of area down through here seeing storms and scattered storms coming through this area quite a bit as well. Just want to show you, though, this is also being reflected in the European model. So this is day 0 to 5. We're going to play this out there to day 5 through 10. There it is. And then to day 10 through 15. And that seems to be the way things are set up for the middle of this month, and models have been more and more consistent with that. As I look a little bit longer in terms of temperatures, this would be the week 3 on top and week 4 map on the bottom. And from the 24th of July to the 30th of July on the top, and the 31st of July through August 6th. And while we have waves of warmer conditions coming through the eastern half of the country, most of the hottest weather stays anchored in the west in this pattern. And that's also observed going all the way up to the middle of August using the ECMWF extended forecast. So you can just see where we've got most of our heat being anchored during that time frame. So pretty consistent forecast overall, and it makes sense to me given what we just analyzed. All right, all hazards map early this morning. Air quality issues, excessive heat watches, warnings, advisories throughout this region, getting into parts of Montana now as well. And we got what's left of Beryl continue to make a flood issue here in the northeast. Just to show you the smoke, we started off with that. I wanted to give you the forecast of the smoke. This is just through the next 48 hours or so, looking at that western wildfire smoke as the smoke from Canada gets wrapped up into the low over Illinois right now and spreads a little bit farther to the east. But our western wildfires are really kind of adding quite a bit of smoke into the atmosphere right now. Again, I think I looked yesterday, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, 2.8 or 2.9 million acres have burned so far this year compared to less than 800,000 a year ago at this time. So just for some reference. Off of our southeast coast, I forgot about the storm reports I put in here. I did want to show you just yesterday. Remember, we had Beryl that made it through here, and we had an upper level low that sat there. So strong to severe storms around the upper level low, and then again in that upper right quadrant of Beryl's motion, a lot of severe wind reports and hail damage, and wind damage from tornadoes here in New York, where there were 5 tornadoes reported. Now let's go to the southeast. This is the current flow right now, and it's just dominated by a couple of large high-pressure cells. That's the Bermuda high, and this one, it's a little broken on its northern side, that's the Pacific high. And the placement of these two high-pressure cells, I think, is going to be key to figuring out where things are going to go. I want to step you up in the atmosphere, though. Let's go up to 850 millibars. We can see a little bit more of that flow about a mile above our heads, and how far to the north the jet stream level winds have retreated. Maybe we can see them better by just going to 250 millibars. That's where the jet stream lives. And it is important to note this. So around this feature, this is really fascinating. There's a high-pressure cell here. Okay, see it kind of opening up like this. There's a ridge that's going on right there, but there's a weak coastal low. And what's going to be interesting about this is what happens kind of in this almost like saddle point right in the middle, down here in the southwestern United States. Kevin, I know I got a guy named Kevin that watches a lot. Hey, Kevin, keep an eye on this. I'll show you why in a minute. And the next thing is actually going to be just sitting off of our southeast coast. Now, you see in the upper levels, there's a ridge, but near the surface, there's actually a low-pressure cell underneath this, which is very characteristic of a tropical event. So today, Arizona, we have a slight risk for severe storms. Again, sitting in that saddle point. We could also watch here in the western high plains for storms. Tomorrow, day 2, we look out. We're going to watch here. And then once we get into the 13th, storms coming out of the northwest on a frontal boundary. I'll show you those in just a few moments coming in on some of the models here. But coming back, the National Hurricane Center still has a 10% chance of development of this weak feature that's sitting off of the southeast coast. And I couldn't be happier if this thing really does get a little bit more momentum and effort into it to bring these rains through. So I just quickly played you through the rest of the day on Thursday here. So you can see the storms erupting out west, including those we're concerned about down in Arizona. Isolated convection here. See this? And this would be this evening. But I'm keeping a close eye on that rain coming into parts of South Carolina, but more of North Carolina, Virginia, getting into Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey. We need this rain desperately in this region. Look at that. Let's get this pulse of moisture from this weak tropical system in to help fight against some of the drought issues. Now, this only plays you out through midday on Saturday, and on Saturday evening, we're going to watch this corridor for the risk of strong to severe storms. We can start to see it in the artificial intelligence. We watch this model increase the chances of rainfall in this area in its latest runs. There's the moisture that's coming out of that tropical system. But there's something else going on here. We have the Bermuda high that's kind of helping with this. And it's also pushing some flow into the Caribbean, to Mexico, helping to ameliorate that drought, and also increasing our chances for rain across the entirety of the south from Texas into the southeast. So that's the AIFS. This is the NBM. See those storms? There's our southwestern monsoonal flow. We're going to watch for storm complexes in this area, especially on Saturday. And here's that rainfall that we need to be getting from that weak tropical system that's sitting here. That's the NBM. Here is the WPC forecast. Let's go ahead and have a look at the European model forecast, 7-day. And this is the GFS. So you can see there are better storms being resolved in these models through here that we have to just keep taking a closer look at. All right, context. This is where we've been since June 1. And now you understand why I'm so anxious to get those rains into this area, given how very, very dry it's been. But take note of the west. I mean, you can just look at these high values suggesting some of the driest, in some cases the driest conditions on record in parts of the western United States. And I don't see much of that changing in the near term. Another way to put it into context is just looking at the last 30 days. We did see, of course, now we've included Beryl's rains through about this point. This only goes through early in the morning on the 10th, but we've now added that into this. So we've kind of worked against that region of drought. We need to get some moisture in through here. But right in the middle, there's an area in through here. There's a lot of ag in this region. And the problem has been that it's been difficult to get storms to push into this region out of the Midwest. And we don't, well, you saw in the forecast, I don't have a lot of moisture coming into that area. Let's just go back and look at one map, which means we're getting into a bit of more of a dire situation for some growers in this area. Okay, to show the models, let's get here. This is just the ECMWF this morning. I'm still repairing the GFS issues right now. Going out to Friday into Saturday. Again, we're going to watch for those storms Saturday afternoon and evening right in through this area here. We've already seen that moisture coming up off the East Coast. What I'll be watching for is next Tuesday, Wednesday. See this low curling up? High pressure behind it. Frontal boundary sweeps in some rain here next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that's going to be clearing things out. Behind that high pressure, cooler conditions. And we need this front. This has to verify. Because if that front, again, this is next Thursday night, can sweep through this area, it would be delivering rain into some key regions that desperately need to get this rain. So I know it's 192 hours out in the forecast, but we've got to be watching for that one carefully. Probability-wise, over the next 3 days, it's mainly going to be the storms that are coming through, the flow around that tropical system that helps this region and down into Mexico. But as we play forward, we're looking at the chance of getting an inch. We've now included the weekend chances for storms here and then through midweek next week, where that frontal boundary could stall out here. And can we increase that rainfall probability farther to the south? That's going to be a critical area to kind of fill in just as one area to be watching. So let's work our way toward finishing this up by going out to the week 2 forecasts. Notice how well aligned the CPC forecast is with the European. I'm working on some new maps for the GEFS, the GFS ensemble. I have a feeling that the data source that I'm using to compare to historical averages, which is the one I thought I should use, might be increasing this bias. So we're going to look at that carefully. But man, do we need these rains to verify in this region. We'll watch that carefully. What's promoting all of this is the presence of those high pressure cells. I mean, I just fast forwarded out to the 13th. See this ridge and the flow around it in the Caribbean? That is what's keeping the Gulf of Mexico open. And the farther out there we look, I went all the way out to the 19th, you can see the influence of that high. See this? And there's another high that settles in right here, and its flow comes out and around. And why those week 2 forecasts look wet is there's going to be convergence in through this area. Gulf moisture coming up from the south, converging on this area, and that's why we're increasing the chances of this spot being wetter than average into week 2. So very critical forecast for that particular area. Okay, bigger picture going forward. If we just look back to where we've been on our pressure patterns so far this summer, Bermuda high started off here. It's now edged its way toward the east coast. The Pacific high has been displaced a bit west. We've had a deeper low that's sat in this area, a deeper low that's been here, and tropical low pressure, which has been what's supportive of Beryl. I show you this because that's where we've been up to this point, and where it's going, there's been a few changes. The Pacific high may be a bit stronger to the north. The Bermuda high continues to open up in this direction. But if there had been low pressure that's been sitting here, we kind of see it moving more toward Greenland. And that's all a part of this narrative I've had of the more northward retreat of the jet stream. So if we zoom in here in the United States and just take a look at a 30-day forecast for precipitation anomalies, this continues to evolve. And it's drier in the Canadian Prairie, but I still think we have a stormy corridor in through here because there's nothing shutting down this Gulf moisture. And this is desperately needed to verify. All right, I'm just going to leave you at that. Last thing is just some global update. 10-day outlook for the planet. Again, we've watched this area closely. Continues to show up drier. Mayu front farther to the north. Raining in the North China Plain, Manchurian Plain. Indian monsoon stalled south. Ganges River Valley is drier. We have the parked frontal boundary down here in southern Brazil. You can see it pretty well on the temperature map. But that heat that's in this part of Europe getting over to western Russia has got to continue to be monitored. So that's where I'll leave you. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and we'll pick this up for one last video on Friday. Have a good one. Thanks.